Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be analysing the poem Will It Be So Again by Cecil Day Lewis. So as always, a little bit of information about our poet. Cecil Day Lewis lived between 1904 and 1972. He was a British poet who served as the Poet Laureate for a number of years as well. Will it be so again? Will it be so again that the brave, the gifted are lost from view, and empty, scheming men are left in peace their lunatic age to renew? Will it be so again? Must it always be so that the best are chosen to fall and sleep, like seeds, and we too slow in claiming the earth they quicken, and the old usurpers reap what they could not sow? So starting off with a really powerful verb. Will is a modal verb, and the speaker is compelling us over here to contemplate the idea that war is something that keeps on being repeated. This is an anti-war poem, and it's specifically targeting politicians and their role in creating and sustaining wars. So Cecil Day Lewis is criticizing politicians in this poem and lamenting the sacrifices that soldiers have made in order to fight these wars that are not even their own wars, but these ideas and schemes of those people in charge. So throughout the poem, we have the contrast between how he depicts the soldiers and their sacrifice and the fact that they are, they've lost their opportunity to live a full life, with that of the image of the scheming men, of the politicians who are power hungry and who want wars to last a long time to maintain their power and their influence. So starting off with Will It Be So Again, we're going to see that this is repeated throughout the poem, further emphasizing the fact that war and the idea of war seems to just continue in every generation. Remember, if you think about the world wars, World War I was called the Great War. They thought this was the war to end all wars, and then 20 years later, or a generation or two later, we have World War II. So this idea that war is repetitive, it keeps on happening. That the brave, the gifted are lost from view. The diction of brave and gifted show us how much these young people have to offer. The phrase lost from view is a euphemism because they're not just lost from view. The brave, the gifted, these are talking about the young men who gave their lives in wars. So it actually means that they died, that they've been killed in battle. And the use of the euphemism over here is important because it's showing us that he's not actually, the focus of his critique is not on even the sadness of the soldiers dying, but it's even more so on the politicians and how he is so angry at them for their role in these young men's demise. So these young men have been lost from view. They've lost their opportunity to live the lives that were planned out for them, or their destinies. It's been cut short. And we've also, as a society, lost these gifted and brave men and all they could have contributed to our society. And furthermore, they seem to be lost from view. We don't seem to be remembering their sacrifice in enough detail to not be destined to repeat the same mistake over again. And empty, scheming men. So we see that contrast with the diction over here. We have empty, we have scheming. Empty means devoid of something. Scheming, they're sort of making these evil plans. And this is talking about the politicians. They're cunning, they're manipulative, they're unscrupulous and corrupt. And so the brave and gifted soldiers are lost from view. And ironically, the empty, scheming men are left in peace, and they are able to renew and they are able to live to a ripe old age. So this is something that the speaker is really angry about. How could this possibly be? This is very ironic that those who had so much positivity to offer the world, their lives have been cut short, whereas those who are empty and scheming actually are the ones who remain behind to lead society after war is over. They're left during peace times to be leaders, and also they are able to grow old. The use of the word lunatic shows us how the speaker is extremely critical and condescending towards politicians. He thinks that they are foolish, he thinks they are crazy, and he thinks that war is something that is chaotic and something that is unnatural and irrational. And so these men who have orchestrated this chaos are left to live to a ripe old age, and this makes the speaker quite angry. And then we end off with the same question that the title of the poem is, and also the first line of the poem, Will it be so again? And this is a question which is supposed to, make us think, make us contemplate. But this question almost acts also as a resigned conclusion. War, is it just destined to continue? Is it destined to just keep on happening? So the question mark is showing the sense of desperation and asking and this urgency of, is this actually going to keep happening? But the fact that this question, the same exact question, has been repeated shows the sort of resigned attitude of the speaker to the fact that yes, it probably will happen again. Continuing on to the next stanza, must it always be so that the best are chosen to fall and sleep? So here we have once again another reference to those young men, those soldiers who died in battle. They are chosen to fall and sleep, another euphemism, chosen to fight and die, essentially. Like seeds, here we have a simile. We are comparing these soldiers to seeds, and think about the connotations of seeds. It's a new beginning, it's rebirth, it's restarting, the sense of growth. But, he says, and we too slow in claiming the earth they quicken. So we using an inclusive pronoun over here, and now he's shifting the blame not just on the politicians, but on society as a whole, us, the readers included. We have become too slow in recognizing their sacrifice and recognizing the error of our ways in terms of starting these wars or continuing these wars. And he's saying that we need to actually, as a society, reflect on these soldiers' deaths and the loss of their opportunity instead of just hurtling again into another war, into another conflict. The earth that they quicken is talking about the soldiers' bodies that invigorate the earth in which they're buried. And it's a comment by the speaker and telling us we as a society need to learn from this mistake. We need to use the seeds of this. We need to essentially take this as a lesson or as a seed to gain a deeper understanding into something. So seeds referencing the lost potential that these soldiers are being buried as seeds. We're never going to see them grow. But also we need to see the seeds of their death, that we need to see their death as a seed, as a starting point for us to reflect and think about how we can prevent wars going forward. And now we have another example of irony, because now we have this contrast from this sort of pedestal we've put the young men on who have died in battle to the politicians, the old usurpers who reap what they could not sow. A usurper is someone who takes power sort of and benefits from power illegally, someone who is not supposed to be in power. And so this is the speaker commenting on his belief that politicians are responsible for a lot of the terrible things and the chaos of war. And he says that these old usurpers, continuing with the metaphor, sorry, not with the metaphor, with the simile, the comparison of the seeds, he's saying that they actually reap the benefits from what these young men have given up. So instead of the young men actually getting the opportunity to live their lives or benefiting from their sacrifice, it's actually these old politicians who should not even have power, who are gaining from this. So there's a sense of injustice that the speaker is continuing to remark upon. And we have another rhetorical question over here. It doesn't seem to make sense to him. And so he's constantly asking these questions, making us think, but also showing us how unbelievable and insane this seems to be, that this is how the world seems to work. Will it be so again, the jungle code and the hypocrite gesture, a poppy wreath for the slain and a cutthroat world for the living, that stale imposture played on us once again? Will it be as before, peace with no heart or mind to ensue it, guttering down to war, like a libertine to his grave? We should not be surprised. We knew it happened before. So continuing on with that repetition, that repeated refrain of would it be so again, we have a dash, and now he's going to explain what he means by what it is and what is happening again. The jungle code and hypocrite gesture. Jungle code is referring to a sense of all chaos and the unpredictable nature of war, and how during wartime, there's no sort of laws and everything is just turned upside down. So he's talking about that. Is it going to happen again? Is it always going to be this trend that in every generation there's going to be this war where we're not acting like humans, we're acting according to sort of jungle rules? And the hypocrite gesture, talking about a handshake over here, a gesture, a symbol, politicians shaking hands, but really it's hypocritical because all their talk is about peace, but in reality they are pushing for war. They are sponsoring, development of new weaponry. They are making sort of secret deals. They're having these handshakes, having these news statements where they're proclaiming peace, but in reality they are, creating more war and creating more chaos. A poppy wreath for the slain and a cutthroat world for the living. So here we have a contrast over here between those who are slain. Slain is a very sort of a word with violent connotations. They've been killed in the prime of their lives, these soldiers. Poppies as a flower that is used as a symbol of remembrance for those who died in battle. It originated after World War One, when in these old battlefields where soldiers had died, all these poppy flowers started to grow, and now people around the world, come Remembrance Day, they wear poppies to commemorate that. And so a poppy wreath, a wreath is sort of like a circular shaped thing that could be made from poppies or flowers. That's something that can be laid at monuments or memorials or even at graves. And this is what we do to commemorate those who have died. But the speaker is saying over here, is that all that they get? Is this literally what we're going to give them? They've given up their lives, and we don't seem to have learned our lesson from this. He's absolutely frustrated by this idea that we're going to commemorate them with a poppy wreath, but we're not going to actually learn from our mistakes. And a cutthroat world for the living. And so now we have this contrast, because now we're saying, okay, for the living, those who have supposedly survived the battle, survived the war, what are they left with? A cutthroat world, because he said the world just keeps descending into war again. So it becomes this violent and brutal place once again. Why is this the case? Because that stale imposture played on us once again. The politicians have played us, they've tricked us again. They've made us believe that they were actually campaigning for peace, when in reality, they were pushing us once again into that cycle of war. And that repetition of the word again is showing the cycle of lying and the ongoing and everlasting, never-ending nature of war. Will it be as before, referencing the previous stanza now, what he's just spoken about, the cutthroat world for the living, being played, being tricked by politicians again? Peace with no heart or mind to ensure it. So he's saying that peace is never actually going to be a reality, because there's no heart or mind that's actually going to create it into reality. That peace can only actually be achieved when people apply both their hearts and their minds. Hearts representative of emotion, minds representative of intellect. So we can see heart and mind is actually an example of metonymy, when you have sort of something representing a concept or an idea, heart representing emotion, mind representing intellect. So another critique on politicians, he's accusing them of not being able to actually foster peace or maintain peace. Guttering down to war. The diction guttering over here is really powerful, even just the sound as well of the word, of that sharp T sound, guttering. And the fact that they're going down to war, it sort of elevates the idea of peace, and going down to war is something that is despicable, that's inferior, that's not wanted. And so guttering down to war sounds like a really sort of subversive idea, like a libertine to his grave. So we have a simile over there. And a libertine is a person who freely indulges in pleasures without really thinking about it. So it's referencing once again that idea of the jungle code, the idea that when war happens, we sort of suspend our humanity. We don't follow we don't follow just ideas. We just sort of follow, basic instincts and give into things instead of thinking things through, having a heart, having a mind. We sort of become dehumanized when we're fighting in war, according to the speaker. We should not be surprised. We knew it happened before. So we, using the reference to society over there, the inclusive pronoun, and he's very frustrated and resigned in this statement. He says, well, we shouldn't be surprised at all. This has happened before. We've seen politicians, how they're hypocritical, how they talk about peace, but they never actually have the heart and mind to actually create it. They're too corrupt. They're too selfish after their own, into everything for their own benefit, and letting innocent people suffer as a result by continuing this cycle of wars. So he says, actually, we should be resigned to the fact that we've seen this happen before. This is why he keeps asking this question, because he knows that there's a cycle, and he's asking now, is the cycle going to be everlasting? Is it just going to keep on continuing? Shall it be so again? Call not upon the glorious dead to be your witness then. The living alone can nail their promises to the ones who said, it shall not be so again. So moving into the final stanza, the speaker shifts from being really quite resigned, especially in the final line of the previous stanza, to now being a bit more assertive. He says, "Shall it be so again?" So he changes up the modal verb over there to make an impact. And then he uses call, which is an imperative, starting off this statement with a verb. And he says, call not upon the glorious dead to be a witness then. He says, you cannot call upon the dead, the soldiers who have died, to be the witness for the promises that peace will actually happen, because clearly we haven't, learned our lesson from their deaths. And he tells us not to rely on these dead honorable soldiers. They've sacrificed their lives. Now he says it's up to the living to actually be the ones to fight against this idea of war. He says the living alone can nail their promise to the ones who said, "It shall not be so again." The use of the word nail, it's imagery of like a nail being hammered into the wall, and it needs to be done with a lot of effort, a lot of harshness, and a lot of assertiveness. And so that's what he's saying over here. The lesson that we need to take from all this is that the dead have done enough to teach us this lesson and to make us believe in peace, but now it's up to the living to hold our politicians accountable, to nail the promises to the ones who said it shall not be so again. Those politicians, our leaders, said that they would put an end to war, that they would foster peace, so we need to hold them accountable for their promises, so that actually we can answer that question of no, hopefully not. We will break the cycle and hold our politicians accountable so that we do not have this continuous and endless cycle of war and violence and brutality. And we fix that corruption by ensuring that we remind the politicians and our leaders of the promises they made to our society. If we look at the structure of the poem, it has a really slow pace. There's long sentences, and this is because the speaker's words have been carefully considered, and he wants his readers to read really carefully, unlike the politicians who seem to act impulsively and irrationally without thinking. There is some enjambment, but there's also some end stop lines, and there's also caesura when there's a pause or full stop in the middle of the line. And this combination shows the sense of the unpredictable nature of war. It shows that war is continuing, but also highlights how the speaker desires it to end. So we have some of those end stop lines showing that he hopes it to end, but ultimately the enjambment continues. And the enjambment shows the continuation of war, but also the continuation of the speaker's frustration, how he's letting out all of his anger in this poem. There's lots of rhetorical questions showing the speaker's incomprehension of the evil nature of politicians and how it's absolutely unbelievable how the same thing keeps happening and we never seem to learn our lesson. The tone of the poem is, at different times, melancholic, angry, bitter, cynical, despairing, commanding, assertive, adamant, and resigned. The mood is ominous, angry, and frustrated. The theme and message is about politicians and corruption with those in power, with our leaders, that they can be manipulative. It's about the tragedy of war, the promise and the longing for peace, holding politicians accountable, and the older versus the younger generation. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you found this video helpful. Please remember to like the video and to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.